All right, hello everybody. Now that we have looked at some of the basics of QGIS, including some of the more difficult things like using the model designer, but using them appropriately to save labor so you get an idea of what's possible, we now want to get to the most fun part of any geographical information system in the 21st century, something that didn't exist when I was studying when I was studying ArcGIS back in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, and then became the GIS specialist for the Los Angeles Zoo for 4 years. And that is 3D maps. It was not an easy feature to find. Of course, there were people doing such work in specialist areas, but for the average student and the software that was available, 3D visualization was somewhat of an anathema, and now it's fairly simple. So the first thing you want to do in order to get terrain elevation in your maps is to understand the concept of a DEM, or digital elevation map, and how to bring it in. And because QGIS is a program that comes very lean, you've got to download the plugins to make it work. And fortunately, there is a plugin for QGIS which is called, and let's look for it by putting in QGIS, I'm sorry, not QGIS, DEM, which is called Open Topography DEM Downloader. And then there's other ones like Quick DEM 4JP and Sentinel Hub and DEM to 3D Map Tiler. But the one that we're going to work with is Open Topography DEM Downloader, which gives you access to the shuttle radar topography missions at 90 meters when the space shuttle flew over the Earth and bounced the radar to the Earth, and then 30 meters, which is pretty good, and then ALOS World 3D 30-meter ellipsoid, global bathymetry, Europe's DTM 30 meters. So we generally use either ALOS or SRTM 30 meter. And the only thing is you have to get an API key from opentopography.org to download the DEM. So I'm going to reinstall my plugin for you. It'll be the first time. And then I'm going to find it, and we'll find it under, there's Sentinel Hub, another one of them under Web. This one doesn't come in under Web. This one comes in under Quick DEM for JPC. I have so many that I often get confused as to where they're all positioned. So give me 1 second here. Right, and note that it is found actually under raster because you are bringing in a raster image, which means an image that has pixels, not a vector, which is a mathematical formula for lines and polygons and points, all the stuff we were looking at in the previous tutorials. This is a raster. So it's like a newspaper picture with those tiny dots. If you look too close, you just blurry, but when you pull back, they resolve into an image. So it's under raster, whereas some of the other ones, like the SGM downloader, are under plugins, and the Sentinel Hub for the Sentinel satellite is under web. We're not going to worry about those for this course. We're going to use the Open Topography one, and then we go to it. Now, mine lets me start downloading the SRTM 30 and 90. Yours isn't going to do that because you don't have an API key yet. So you need this API key here. And the way that you get an API key is to go to Open Topography API key in Google. And when you get there, you're going to have to create a, oops, I'm going to go that way. We're going to go from Open Topography itself, opentopography.org. You're going to want to log in, because if you don't log in, you can't get one. So when you go home, where is the login in this My Open Topo? So I have My Open Topo, and then I log in with my account. And once you've created your own account for free, then the API key appears under My Open Topo. So it's not going to be under Getting Started or Partner with Us. It's going to be under My Open Topo, and you copy that API key, and it says for use in Blender, which we will also do in this course, but also for QGIS. So when you come here, you then take that API and paste it in, and I didn't get it into my buffer. So it looks like I need to do it again. So click it, copy to clipboard, come back in here, and there we go. That's the API key. So then you say, I want a 30 meter, but you need an extent to download. So we don't have anything on the map right here, so this is not the moment to do it. So I'm going to close this for right now, and I'm going to get some extent. So I'll go to my web as usual, Quick Map Services, and get my Google Hybrid as I always do. And I'm particularly interested, as you know, in Morocco, and I'm particularly interested in the High Atlas Mountains. And so if you ever get lost on the map, there's Marrakesh right there, so I'm not going to get lost. But satellite images at 30 meters are pretty big. So you'll want to sort of take an area that is more or less the size of a city. I know that this is the area I want, but let's go ahead once again and put in our data layer that was from our delimited text layer from our High Atlas Foundation spreadsheet that we've been working with. That's where I always start. And let me find the folder I put it in, spreadsheets, and let me go to the HAF project sites, and I'll get my point coordinates in longitude and latitude, and that should be all I need. Hit add. We did that in the previous tutorials, and they should show up, but you have to make sure that you pick something that'll show up, like this effect drop shadow. That always does well, and there they are. There's the whole, these are all the sites that the HAF is working with. And so when I want my DEM, I want it to cover those areas because that's where the flooding and the earthquakes and the droughts and the pollution that we're concerned with in our project is going on. So now I know the region that I want to come in on. So now we want to go to raster, and we want to go to the Open Topography DEM, and now define the extent. So a couple of things you can do: calculate from layer, calculate from layout map, calculate from bookmark, or use current map canvas extent, or draw on the map canvas. If you want to draw on it, you have a little cursor, and you can say, all right, I really want that. Oops. That didn't work, did it? Select DEM. Let's say draw on map canvas again. Yeah, so it's a selection box. I was thinking of ArcGIS, where it is a literal pen you have to draw. So that extent there with those coordinates for the corners is what I just drew. If you want the whole thing, then you'd say calculate, use current map canvas extent, and it'll be a bit bigger. So you have that option. I'll use the current map canvas extent. And then you just simply say run if you've picked the DEM that you want. DEM for digital elevation map, SRTM for shuttle radar topography mission, one of the satellite, or rather space shuttle missions to gather digital elevation information. And then you need to give a either an output raster or a temporary file. And I think I'll save this to a real file. So in my GIS for Climate tutorial, I'll go ahead and say the High Atlas Mountains DEM and run. And wait for it, drum roll. Wait for it, drum roll. Seems to be taking a there it is. All right. So that's it, and there you are. That's the extent that we drew around. And you have then the white being the top of the mountains and the black being these valleys down below. But you can't do much with it yet. Okay? It can be used for all sorts of purposes. The one that is most exciting to me is doing 3D visualization, such as we also are able to do in ArcGIS. And to do that, there's a couple of ways to do it. right off the bat. The first one is to go to our 3D map view, make a new 3D map view, and then you bend it over. But the reason it's not giving any 3D is because it doesn't know what is what. What is the digital elevation and what is the landscape model. And so for that, you go up here to this little gear and you tell it that you want to have a, you want to use a DEM, and it says you have to select an elevation layer for that. And so I pick the High Atlas Mountains DEM as that, and I apply that. Now it starts to use that as an elevation. You can see where the dips are, the valleys, and whatnot. We're not yet seeing anything in the terrain. So if I do an use terrain shading, still isn't doing what I want it to do. Hold on there. And that may be because I've put it on top. Let me drag this down beneath here and go back to my view, which still should be up here somewhere, unless it quit. So let's try it again. 3D map view, and it's 3D map 1. Now it's all dark. So that may be because I turned on terrain shading and shouldn't have. And the no lights exist in the scene. Vertical scale resolution. If I do flat terrain, it's going to be different. And we have the flat. But if I do DEM, okay, probably no. Should be type DEM raster layer. Maybe the elevation I'm going to get off Google Hybrid. Maybe I did it backwards. Let me just see here. It's not showing that. The elevation is that. And sometimes it's just that it takes a while to do it. So give me a second to verify. All right, I corrected the problem. I've gone now to view, 3D map view, and I managed my 3D map views, and I got rid of the old one, remove it, and start all over because it got confused because I had the High Atlas Mountains DEM on top. And you should start with it on the bottom. You should know that it's there, right? So it is there, but you want to have it on the bottom and have all your other stuff available on top. Then go to the view, 3D map view. Let's start a new 3D map view. And then it comes up, as you can see, and you can start moving the terrain. Of course, it's still flat because we haven't used the digital elevation yet. So you go to that gear I showed you, go out of flat terrain, go to the DEM, and choose the DEM as your information and apply it. And then you have a digital elevation for the mountains. Now, if it doesn't look quite grand, it's because it's not exaggerated. Also, using the Google Hybrid map is not the best map to use for this. So I'm going to go back here and bring in a different Google map. I'm going to bring in just Google Satellite, and I'm going to turn off the hybrid. And my satellite image then will go on top of this. And then the project sites, do I want them? I suppose I do, but they're too big in the big red for this thing. So let me go for maybe green dots. And they also look too big for me for this. So let's bring down the size, bring them down to 2 millimeters. That's a little better. And then when we go to our view and our 3D view, let me manage and erase that view, no longer needed. And let's make a new view. There it is. Pull on that middle mouse button, tilt things over, and go to the gear and go from flat terrain to DEM raster layer and pick the DEM and apply it. It's looking a little bit better, but let's go to vertical scale and let's exaggerate it by bringing that up to say 3 for starters. Ah, it's a little too much, isn't it? Wow. All right, so let's try it again and go and bring it to 2. And that's a little bit better. And with that exaggeration, you can get a better sense of your project sites, where they lie on the topography. These ones over here are fairly high up in the mountain, and that one there is very low. So yay, hooray, all that's fine and good. One of the things that this one does is it also lets you do animation, so you can add to it. There's on-screen navigation, so you can move around using north and south, and that's kind of convenient, isn't it? And you can show camera info for debugging if you wanted to. Zoom in, zoom out. So it has some utility, but the exciting thing is putting in a, oops, space all now. Let me make that so small. How do I make it bigger? There. So, oh yeah, that was so you can dock it. So if you want, you can move this and have it docked and be able to see working on both maps at the same time. So there is sort of some use to that, because then I could turn off my dots or turn them on. So that's kind of fun. But let's make it float, and let's make it undocked, and let's make it big. So there is an animation tool. There's also measurement lines. I mean, that's great. You can make a line to show the horizontal distance and the vertical distance. So there's cool features like that. But getting to the animation, and I keep getting distracted by other cool things like show shadows and all that. Let's go to the animations, and that's what plays the animation. But when it's not clicked on, you see keyframe here, and you can start by saying, all right, great, let's put shadows. Those shadows are ugly. Get rid of those shadows. Where was the shadows? Was this the shadows? Yeah, goodbye. All right. If we wanted to start in this valley here, we could tell it, yes, add a keyframe there at 0, and that becomes, oh, there's already a keyframe there. Well, good for you. So at 0 seconds, we could then say, well, that needs a keyframe. So you then drag the slider to another area and do your rotation or zoom or whatever it is that you want to do, and then add a keyframe there at 41 seconds, and then go down and turn it around, whatever you want to do for that, and add a keyframe there. And you're able to look at the keyframes and edit them. In there, you have the ability to duplicate a keyframe if you want to make it pause, for example. So once I get there, I might want to duplicate that keyframe by, and you can save them, by the way. So somewhere around here, see if I go to this other keyframe there, you can duplicate that keyframe and then add another keyframe, and then I think you can paste, well, I guess you can't paste it in, but you just keep adding keyframes, and then maybe we'll add a keyframe here, and then when you go to play the animation, you can see that it does all sorts of camera moves. And you can do linear interpolation, or you can have an in-quart or an in-quad. So all these different ways, and you can loop it so that when you play it, then it plays its crazy animation, and then when it gets to the end, it starts all over again. So that's fun. Why don't I use this a lot? I think that this inbuilt QGIS 3D viewer is kludgy and it doesn't have a lot of capabilities, so I don't spend much time with it. I don't use it. That's the one under view. There's another one that comes from a plugin that you can get, and that's the one that I favor. So if we go back to plugins, we just did essential plugin number 4, which is Open Topography DEM Downloader. We'll now look for QGIS 2.3. There it is, QGIS 2.3JS. This is a 3D map visualization and web export that works really nicely, and that's the one that I suggest. There's also one for exporting to web, but this is the one for 3D, and I'll reinstall that plugin just in case there was some update. You need to install it for the first time. That one is going to show up under underwear. That's, a kid would think that's funny. Under web, and so it's the QGIS 3JS exporter WebKit. And when you start that out, you get this screen like this, and then you can say, well, the DEM I'm going to use is that piece. And what's nice is it takes that DEM piece that we have, that map extent, but it puts it over a larger extent that's flat. And then you can, of course, you can say, well, I'm going to use this elevation tile. No, not going to use that. I'm going to use that. And you have a flat plane, but we don't need that because we have this. And so the project sites can be put on. They appear in 3D now, but they're appearing on the map of the flat plane as 3D objects. We don't really need that right now because we're not using flat plane, we're using the DEM data. So I can take those off. We don't have any lines or polygons on or a point cloud, but you can see that we have this mountain. Now you can also work with the exaggeration of this mountain in here by going to scene settings, and then you can say, well, the Z exaggeration, I'd like to be 2. And then it redraws it with a much higher exaggeration in there. But it's also pretty well exaggerated to start with at 1. So probably can keep it at 1. Oh, that was bigger than 1, wasn't it? Well then, that was 12. Yikes. All right, so keep it at 1 for better accuracy. Remembering this is a 30-meter pixel map. So, and then in the scene, you can also do a fixed extent and apply that. And you can make that smaller if you like using the map canvas extent. So for example, let me bring this down. If all I want to see is this area where this lake is, it updates, as you can see, but I can tell it to use that map canvas extent, and then that is the extent and the only extent that I get, and I'm focused on that lake right now. So that is a nice feature about this. You can fix the aspect ratio or not. You can have a background be the sky or a solid color. If you want this over a dim kind of purple haze kind of sky, then you can do that and apply that. And that can make for some good mapping. If you want to do coordinate display, you can use map coordinates or latitude, longitude, although I don't see where those show up in here. And I like that the widget here is more conventional to what Blender has. So I think that's nice for the widget. What else can I tell you about this map? You can add a layer, but I don't have any to add right now. The camera can be perspective or orthographic. Orthographic looks straight down. So if you wanted to get that view, you could get that view. Back to perspective. And you have widgets. North arrow can be put in, enable the north arrow. That's often very useful to have. Apply it, and you can see it shows up down here on the right so that as you move around, you know where you're going. I like that. So that's widgets. Header and footer labels are able to be put in. Header label, this is the High Atlas Mountains. And the footer label, these are the HAF project sites in green. And say OK there. And it shows up down here, but you don't really see it because it's black. It would look much better if it was looked at under sky. So let's go back to sky. Now you can see it's the High Atlas Mountains, blah, blah, blah. So that's all good there. And reset the camera position. You can always do that. But this also has an animation feature to it too. So we're looking at layers right now, but here's animation right over here on the left bottom. And you go and you click on, let's see, if we wanted to start looking that way, you would go to camera motion and add a keyframe. And then you would go to another keyframe, because you don't see the timeline in this, and add another keyframe. And then you would turn it a little more, for example, and add another keyframe, and add a little more, and add another keyframe, and pick keyframe 1, and in Edit, you can change the easing in and the delay and the duration. So it's set to 2 seconds. You can see what that looks like if we play it in a loop. So there it is spinning around. Rather nice, I would say. Stop the spin. And you have the ability to go in and, as I said, edit each keyframe. So there are 4 keyframes, and this is what it looks like going through them. So you can scroll through that way. You can name them and go lake, region, close up, whatever you want to say in there. Lake, close up. Give narrative content. I like the fact that you can also add pictures. So if you knew where this was, and we could find out, couldn't we? Because we did that in the last tutorial, but we also have Google Hybrid, which we can look at. So this is the barrage Urgan. And so if we go to maps.google.com and look for barrage Urgan, I think I messed up the spelling. So let me go back and see what it is. It's spelled Wirgane. Wirgane. Barrage Wirgane. So barrage Wirgane would be barrage Wirgane. There it is. And there it is there. And then they give some pictures, see photos over here. And if I like a certain photo, it's a video actually, it's pretty nice. But let's go, like, that's a nice picture. So I would screen capture this picture of the barrage and save it in my QGIS photos. Call it Barrage Wirgane 1, and then come into my map and into my, there we go. And I can add that picture, which I know is now in GIS Photos, at Courage Regani. Open it up and say OK. So what's cool is that when I play this, when I get here, the picture comes up, which is really cool because you're doing an animation and you come in and say, what is this lake here? And then bang, the picture comes up. And you can add pictures to any of these keyframes that you want. You can change the keyframe as well. Like, I'm not sure that I like, it's like in Blender, you got to use all your different mouse things. But if I want to see what it looks like looking at the actual dam there, this is keyframe 2, which I can edit, and which I need to, I guess, pop that in. So which one are you? You're that one there, this one here, this one here. So I want to get into here, and I want to find another picture of this that reflects that. So many pictures to choose from. Ah, there's the actual dam. So if I wanted to have the dam in there and zoom in on it, I could then save it as Courage Regani Dam. Come back to my animation, upload that picture here. Make the name Courage Regani Dam. It's got the picture in there. And I think you can put more than one picture. I mean, literally, you should be able to go and find other images that you like. I'm just going to do this really quickly for this now. Save as Courage Regani Lake. Come back in and add yet another picture. So both of these are in there. You can then say, well, I really want it to last longer than 2 seconds. I'll make this one last 5 seconds. And then when you hit play, you have that one. And then go continue your animation. And 2 pictures come up. And then continue your animation. Where do I continue it? There. And come around that way. So it just gives you an idea that this is powerful for adding multimedia, sort of like we do with Cesium Ion, but with animation that you can endlessly change and replace because you can edit all the keyframes. So I think that's a really cool thing. And you can also, I guess, animate in animation the High Atlas Mountains data, maybe? I'm not sure if you can animate that. If we add, oh, that just changes the texture opacity, right? So that's nothing for this. All right, so a very cool program, very useful. And let's just make sure that in our scene settings, we don't need to use the map canvas fixed extent, map canvas extent. Somehow before we had a whole layer there, and maybe that's because I got rid of the flat plane, so there's a flat plane under it. Yeah. Okay, but it's really fun. And then you can go and you can save the scene as an image or as a 3D model. Image is a PNG that you can export anywhere, but the GLTB is the model that can be opened in Blender. So you can prepare your 3D terrain here, and we'll look at that when we get to Blender, and then export it and use 3D terrain in any 3D program. Or you can export the scene settings, so you can replicate animations that you've done. And I don't know about the plugin settings. That's not within my purview. But a very powerful program, well worth working with. All right, and if you do always on top, then even when it's small, I'm hoping I'm getting this right, it should remain on top. Just like we were docking the other one. This way you can get to your map and you can do whatever manipulations you like and have them reflect right on there. And you just keep turning and seeing. So you have a really, I don't want that flat plane in there. Get rid of the flat plane. Settings. Where did I have the flat plane? Oh, by the way, light and effects is also there. You can put in fog and a point light above the camera and change the color of the fog to make it a miasma of green, and enable outline effects. There's all sorts of crazy stuff that you can do. See, there's a fog upon LA. But I was wondering why I was getting this layer. I think I want to get rid of it. Flat plane. Scene settings, add layer, flat plane. I don't want the flat plane, and it's still there. All right, I can't get rid of the flat plane, but I'm not so disturbed by that. A reload. Yeah, it's still there. Doesn't matter. It's all very, very cool that what we can do with this and how we can edit the keyframes. Oh, maybe it's under layers. Yeah, there's my flat plane. Getting rid of the flat plane. Goodbye. Remove from the layer tree. Yeah, I'm sure I want it. I want to get rid of the flat plane. Remove from the layer tree. Yes, I want to get rid of it. Flat plane. Maybe I can leave that one in there. And there's my fog. My fog is ridiculous now. I don't like my fog anymore. So I want to get rid of my fog. Where's my fog? Light and effects. Get rid of the fog. Boom. Like that. And you can put the directional light. There we go. Much better. Much, much better. But yes, you can certainly move about your map as you like. So this is a really cool tool, and I prefer it to what's available in ARC, especially because I can export it to a 3D program like Blender. So this is Essential Plugin number 5, and this one's really spectacular. And finally, of course, as you'll see in our slideshow curriculum, you can actually export it to YouTube, and then you can play your animation to show people the different places you're going with the pictures embedded. You can also embed documents as well. And so go to different points on the map and then say, great, there is the documents. That's a PDF I put in. And yeah, you have a great ability to use a narrative to move around the map and tell people what you're looking at. Alrighty. That's it for now. And in the next one, we are going to look